Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from today. As Jeff mentioned, the topic for today is reimagining your claims process with some new future-proof technologies. In terms of the structure for the webinar, again, as Jeff mentioned, please feel free to ask questions. It'd be great to have some interaction as we go through the session here today. But we will talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we see with claims processing today with a lot of insurers that we've worked with. We'll talk a little bit about the impact and the importance, really, of information and content as you are handling your claims processes. And then we'll talk a little bit about some technologies that you really should be aware of, ones that we see a lot of forward-thinking organizations taking advantage of, and really reimagining their whole claims process as a result. So let's dive right in. So we'll start with the challenges we see. We see a lot of challenges as organizations want to really optimize their claims processes, and part of this has to do with the changing nature of claims in today's world. So we'll talk about that as we go through here as well. The first point here is that there's just very many touch points. We have claims that are submitted in person, ones that are submitted online. We have lots of different roles involved in the claims process. We have different processes often for different lines of insurance, even within the same organization. So it's a real challenge to be able to manage all those different touch points, be able to provide the right processing or automation based on what information is submitted or what decisions are made, being able to route information or processes to the right individuals is often a challenge for organization. And this area around touch points really is one that we see a lot of organizations struggling with. Another big issue is the just incredible growth of content and information that you have today. So we see that really ramping up in an exponential way. It creates real issues for especially your legacy systems that may not be prepared to handle that information as readily. It's also increasingly complex information, so it's not just information that comes in through standardized forms or written reports. We have a lot of different types of media that are involved as well, and we'll talk more about that as we go through the presentation. One of the areas that number 3 here around increasing customer expectation is we see this one as a really important one for insurers as they look at competition in the market. And this is one of the areas where we see a lot of organizations focusing a lot of their efforts to really improve their customer expectation because they see it as the key to them being able to be competitive. So I think being able to provide a superior user interface for your customers really is incredibly important. We also see a lot of changing within the workforce of these organizations. People retiring, new people coming in, having different expectations or different ways that they're expecting to be able to work within the claims process, and being able to adjust to that new, younger, more computer savvy, more mobile savvy workforce is certainly an area that we see companies focusing on. We also see a lot of disruption in the marketplace. So you see organizations or new companies like Lemonade that are really focused, as we talked earlier, on customer experience and really using that a way to differentiate themselves. We see the friction from being able to move from insurer to insurer is if anything, is less and less over time. So it really heightens the need to be very focused on competition that might be disrupting the marketplace, as well as making sure that your customers are satisfied with the service you're providing them. We talked about technologies at the beginning, and we'll talk about it more as we go through the presentation, but there are definitely emerging technologies that organizations are looking to take advantage of, whether that's the cloud as a deployment platform, artificial intelligence, analytics, machine learning, and many others that we'll explore as we go through the deck here. And then finally, this maybe is the most difficult step of all, but actually creating that modernization strategy. How do you move from what you have today, which is working, maybe not as well as you want it to, but is working, to something that really addresses your requirements, not just today, but really kind of sets you up to be able to succeed in the future. So these are the things we're going to talk about, and we'll go through them in a little bit more detail here as we go through the rest of the presentation. In short, I think it's really time for a new approach. These technology options are available to you. The marketplace is ripe for you to be able to leverage that new technology to really advantage your organization. So let's take a little bit of a look here at some of the priorities that we see insurers really focused on today. First one here is around efficiency and automation, and we'll dive into each one of these in a little bit more detail. So organizations are looking for ways that they can work much more efficiently so they can avoid unnecessary manual steps for their claims adjudicators, claims processors. They also want to try to take as much cost out of the system as possible, whether that's through making things more efficient so you don't necessarily need as big of a workforce, or being able to take away some of the manual steps that are slowing people down and preventing you from being able to keep up with the workloads that you're generating. You also want to make sure you're making better and faster decisions. So how does that work? Well, I think the first thing is that kind of intelligent content starts with data. Really, what the information really is kind of that combination of content. And content can be various document types. It could be office documents. It could be forms that you have. It could be photographs or video that your customers are submitting to you or your claims adjudicator has witnessed. The data, though, is really important because the data really allows you to understand what content you have, how you want to use it, and so forth. So let's take a look at some of the key things you want to be thinking about when you're looking at the information you have within your organization. You want that information to be readily accessible. You need to be able to access it no matter where, from various systems, maybe on mobile devices. You want to be able to enable people to be able to interact with a customer, or maybe the customer themselves wants to be able to have mobile access to the claims process. You need to have the right context for the information. And this is really kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier around data and content together, really allowing you to understand what information you have. But you need to understand the context. What is this photograph? Is it the photograph of an accident? Is it a photograph of a fire, a theft? What are we looking at here? You want it to be available anytime. So, again, you want it to be accessible from any type of device, and you want it to be available no matter when you're trying to access that information. And then the final point is really important, is that you need to make sure that you have good governance of this information. You make sure that you've secured it so that only the right people have access to that information. But you also need to make sure it's accessible for everyone who should have it. And the other thing is around regulations. So regulations are never going to go away. In fact, we see an increase of them in areas around privacy, for example. So you need to make sure that you have the right governance around that so that you're protecting that information, you're retaining it for whatever the regulatory requirements state that you need. Kind of bottom line here is that information needs to be instantly available to anyone who needs it and has the rights to access it. So enterprise content management or content services products can really help you in that way, and being able to manage all of that information and help support your claims processes. And, what kind of problems can ECMs address for you? Well, the first thing is we can extract a lot of information from that document. Obviously, there's some technologies here that have been around for quite some time. Think about things like, data entry, or data extraction software from forms that allow you to read the characters on a form, be able to extract the right information, and often be able to do that with some context so you can know that what you're extracting is a social security number or a date or whatever the relevant information is off that form. You want to add some level of automation to it, and this is certainly where ECM platforms can help you to move information through a business process and be able to make sure that, after they've extracted that information, it's attached to a specific claim, and that claim itself can have a process for moving it forward through the adjudication process. But also you want to make sure that system has the ability to provide you some insights. Do you have bottlenecks that you need to address? Do you have error conditions that are coming up frequently that you need to maybe do some adjustments with your claims process to be able to help with? So there's some key capabilities that ECM can therefore provide to really make the claims process work more efficiently. We talked about this earlier, but a key priority for modern insurers is around customer experience, being able to provide a really superior customer experience that delights customers, that doesn't frustrate them, that makes it very easy for them to give you the information that you need to be able to process that claim. You want And as we mentioned earlier, it's increasingly, the barriers from being able to move from one insurer to another are lower today than they've ever been. And so you really need to focus on this in order to provide a competitive advantage against your customers. It really is a key to retaining customers long term. Now, when we talk about content, we've often seen that, there's a lot of content that organizations are struggling with. They have, office documents, email, maybe information that's stored historically in various hard drives or systems within your organization. But what we see today is that this information is exploding, both in the volume and also in the different types of information. And when it's all coming in through some big, funnel, it's difficult to understand what you're getting. What do you want to do with different document formats to be able to organize them appropriately, but also being able to attach them in the right to the right claims and be able to make sure that you have the right information that you need to be able to process a claim. So you really need to not only organize that information, but extract key information from those documents so that you understand, what this is related to, what case it's related to, who submitted this information, and how you might be able to use that through the claims process. So extracting key metadata from those documents allows you to both structure the management of that information appropriately. It also makes it much easier for you to find information. So if you're going looking for a specific document, that information that you've extracted, that data you've extracted from the content really does help that out. And I think the explosion here is also really worth pointing out, that we're getting much more information, many more different types of documents being submitted as part of the claims process. But one of the challenges that organizations have, even when they're doing a good job of managing information, is they find that they are managing it in different silos within the organization. So you might have information, for example, coming in with email. You just leave in your email inbox. Other information might be stored in other systems. Maybe it's SharePoint, maybe it's Box, maybe it's a digital asset management product that you have. It could be on individual hard drives or on file shares. And being able to pull all this information so that you have kind of one way of looking for all the information that's relevant for your content is really an important piece of the strategy that you need to be thinking about when you're talking about being able to manage all this content. Having these silos clearly is just not a viable approach, one that you really need to make sure that the systems that are at the center of your process are really have the ability to federate throughout your enterprise and be able to get all the information you need to be able to process a claim or be able to manage your business. All right, so let's talk a little bit about one of the priorities here that's really attached to a key piece of technology, and that's around the cloud and cloud adoption. So, I think a lot of organizations are either in the process of making their journey to the cloud, or certainly considering that journey to how can we do it? How can I take advantage of the advantages that we're either have identified ourselves or seeing other organizations be able to take advantage of. And certainly one of those is around cost and complexity. So, we see a lot of organizations really looking at the cloud as a way to simplify their cost structure, to reduce their upfront costs, be able to move costs from CapEx to OpEx, and be able to really lower the barrier to be able to take advantage of some of these technologies. Another thing around cloud is there are cloud-based technologies that once you've made that move to the cloud, you really have better access to being able to take advantage of some of those capabilities. Now, as we look, over the past 20 years, and then we look at the next 5 years, I think that the chart here is pretty obvious that over the past 20 years, we've gone from a few billion documents to over 10 billion documents. But you can see here over the next 5 years that we're just over doubling the number of documents that we expect to see. And that includes, we have a customer that's dealing with over 2 billion customer communications annually. They're getting a combination of 3 billion SMS and email messages that they're receiving from customers. So there's a lot of information that's passing back and forth. And this explosion in content is part of the reason why the cloud is attractive, because the cloud really provides the ability to have much more scalability and much more flexibility to do that scaling without, again, having to do a significant capital investment to be able to support that. So when we think about the cloud, it really ought to be, about choice here. I mean, it's not really about whether you want to remain on premises or take advantage of the cloud. Most organizations have identified that the cloud really provides some significant benefits here. Whether you're using one of the kind of public cloud infrastructures, one of the major vendors like AWS or Google Cloud Platform or Azure, or whether you want to develop your own internal cloud or use one of the clouds supplied by a vendor, such as Mixio and many others provide their own cloud environments as well. There's no one-size-fits-all here. I mean, there's advantages and disadvantages of different platforms. I think there are some certain advantages to using a vendor-managed platform, but certainly many customers of ours and of other systems self-manage their clouds, whether using public infrastructure or not. Another important consideration is around hybrid cloud implementations, ones where you might have some of the information either on-premise within your organization or in your own internal cloud, but you have the ability to leverage public cloud for other types of operations to be able to move, as you move through the process, maybe some of that processing moves into public cloud infrastructure. And I think, the key here is that it's enabling you to operate at scale. It really allows you to scale out your operations so you're meeting not only your requirements you have today, but it really positions you to be able to very easily expand that scalability to take advantage of the cloud when your business doubles or triples or quadruples. And the final priority that we want to kind of touch on today is around compliance. And I think, the recognition here is that compliance is not going away as a priority. In fact, there are new regulations coming out every year. We see a lot of development of new regulations around privacy as well. So that's a key area that you're going to need to think about as you deploy onto the cloud, especially onto a public cloud, to make sure that you're addressing those privacy concerns, but also that you have the right structure within the management of your information so that you can retain the information you need to retain for compliance reasons. So if you need to be able to hold on to things for 7 years or longer, you have the ability to enforce that retention within the system, and you have the ability either, hopefully in an automated way, to be able to ensure that information is not accidentally deleted. Some examples of what we're seeing with compliance today are, in Europe, GDPR is obviously a really significant privacy set of privacy regulations that are adopted. We see that coming to the United States, mostly through states, but these states are, started with California in 2018, but we see, many more states getting on board on this and either following something roughly approximating what California enacted a couple of years ago, or developing their own. But you have New York and Massachusetts, Nevada, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maine, North Dakota, and it goes on. And I think we're likely to see more and more of that here over the coming years, and potentially some federal regulations as well. We see the same type of thing in the UK, adding some insurance conduct standards. And then you have a lot of the existing regulations that you need to be able to follow, whether that's ADA or regulations in the UK and Europe also that need to be taken into consideration. And one of the challenges that we see is that, with legacy solutions, there are some real limitations that prevent you from being able to meet all the challenges that you are identifying as you consider future solutions. Outdated architectures make it very difficult for you to potentially move that solution onto a cloud. So if you want to be able to move onto the cloud but don't want to have to change platforms as a result, you want to just be able to do like a lift and shift onto the cloud. A lot of times these outdated architectures make that very difficult and maybe don't take advantage of the cloud in ways that really make that cost effective. But leaving them as they are is increasingly expensive to operate, and potentially even more so to maintain those solutions. So you see organizations that are turning up their maintenance rates, or you're paying that maintenance rate year after year after year and getting very little from an innovation perspective. So the platforms are not keeping pace with your requirements for the technology. They're also not really designed for some of the priorities you might have today. So we talked about mobile access earlier. So, are those platforms positioned to be able to take full advantage of mobile? Not always. In fact, most of the time, they really aren't. They're having to pigeonhole it, trying to fit a square peg in a round hole rather, so that you can to really be able to take advantage of mobile. Often it's clumsy and doesn't really work the way you want to, and maybe doesn't provide the level of flexibility that you're looking for. A lot of times these solutions, as I mentioned earlier, are really not cloud friendly, so they're not really positioned to allow you to take advantage of the cloud, limit your ability to scale, probably increases your costs even further with those types of limitations. Now, a lot of times these technologies have the ability to build through integration new capabilities into it, but the difficulty of marrying, kind of next generation technology with last generation APIs or SDKs, especially in a legacy platform where those are not being significantly invested in, can really make that difficult and expensive and maybe impossible to be able to really take advantage of some of these technologies. And also they have the limitations in terms of, maybe not basic retention capabilities from a compliance perspective, but making sure that you're taking advantage or you're taking into consideration a lot of the newer compliance mandates, and especially things around privacy really require, in some cases, thinking about things in a different way than platforms that were architected 10 years or more ago. So I guess the summary of that is that the old way of managing content is just not really working very well for a lot of organizations. So let's talk a little bit about what some of those modern requirements are. So as you start to think about what kind of platform do I need to be on to be able to take advantage, what are some of the key capabilities that you need to have? So I think one of them certainly is the ability to support all kinds of digital form factors. So not just forms or Office documents or PDF files, but audio files, photographs, video. We have seen increasingly companies that they're doing really innovative things, allowing customers to take pictures of an accident scene, or be able to take video of a home after a robbery, to be able to provide a more complete and more easy to understand way for processing those types of situations. You need to be able to bridge various information silos. So obviously, these solutions in many cases are going to have some type of ability to manage your information, to manage your data and your content. But you need to make sure that it also has the ability to federate that capability and be able to bridge together some of the silos of information that have existed for years within your organization. There's a lot of content out there that you're not always going to be able to move completely into one system. You need a system that can really understand what content and information it's storing, so it can deliver you some insight and provide some intelligence about the information that it's storing for you. And as I mentioned earlier, it needs to embrace some of these new content types. Going to the bottom row here, I think governance and security again remains a very important area of consideration. You want a system really that allows you to adopt the cloud, but be able to do it rapidly. So you need to be able. That cloud shouldn't be a hindrance to being able to deploy new capabilities and new systems. The cloud really ought to be an enabling function. So making sure you have a system that allows you to take advantage of the acceleration and that you can take advantage of on the cloud becomes important. So really quickly, the last two items here. I think scalability is certainly an important aspect here. As you grow the business, or as you have plans to grow your business over the next coming years, you want a system that can grow with you. But one of the advantages that the cloud has is it really allows you not only to scale to extreme levels, but also allows you to tune that scalability as you need to. So if you have seasonal peaks, if there's economic conditions that limit or reduce your business in certain areas, you have the ability with the cloud to scale up and scale down to meet those specific requirements. And you can actually reduce costs in a lot of cases because you're not buying your systems, you're not buying your infrastructure to meet peak requirements. You can actually tailor that much more fine-tuned way to meet requirements at that time or in the very near future. You also want a system that is positioned to make it easy for you to make changes to your existing apps or to build new apps on top of that platform to be able to take advantage of new market opportunities, to protect yourself against new competition or new disruption in the market that you're seeing. So you will need to have a system that has tools that allow you to change that content or your content-centric apps very rapidly. And I think that's one of the areas where we see some real challenges with legacy systems. They have scripting or configuration or development languages that you can work in, but those tend to be pretty expensive and they take a long time, and it can be often very difficult to make changes to existing systems. So, looking at some of the challenges here, I think, a lot of the legacy systems are really not allowing you to federate your system. Everything is being stored in a single repository. They have a suite of capabilities, but they're not really always tightly integrated in a way that makes it feel like you're dealing with one product. You're dealing with, a product for content management, maybe a different product for document scanning, a different product for retention, maybe a different product for search capabilities. Not really a platform, it's really a suite of different products, and they all have their own development languages, they all have their different configurations. Makes it very difficult and expensive to be able to configure all those. They don't always have great cloud solutions either. They're not architected for the cloud, and even if you can move them into the cloud, they're not necessarily taking advantage of things like scalability, things like the flexibility in terms of the amount of compute that you need, or the amount of storage you need, or the amount of search capabilities you need. You're scaling up and scaling down the entire system as one, and again, that isn't always an easy process to do. They can be difficult to develop on, again, using legacy, older programming languages. Maybe it's more difficult to find integrators or programmers that can do that. And the cost is certainly, a key area here. Now, content services is just kind of the more recent content management technology platforms leverage what we call content services, which are services that are deployable in the cloud that allow you to do all the things that ECM platforms are capable of doing, but can do them much more rapidly and in a much easier way. So certainly being able to support multiple repositories, being able to federate all the different silos that might exist in your organization is important. It has a single platform, so all the capabilities are built on top of a single configuration structure, a similar programming metaphor, so you have the ability to, using low-code tools, using visual tools to be able to develop not just the management of information or processing or business processes, but every piece of the capabilities you need are laying on one single platform. You want a system that is cloud native, that's going to position you to be able to take full advantage of the cloud, be able to leverage all the benefits of tiered storage on the web, being able to scale up different capabilities as you need them. Very important. Low-code tooling, I think this is an area where we see a lot of innovation, certainly with our products, but in other products as well. And I think it's really important. It really is a key to allowing you to be successful with your solutions, because we've all been a part of projects where there was a real opportunity to deliver a killer application, but because of poor requirements definition or limitations within the tool or just difficulty and being able to customize products can make them very expensive, very lengthy implementation cycles, and they don't always work when you get them out. They don't always completely match the requirements, or perhaps you haven't considered the end users, and so it really puts the end user burden at significant, and so you get low adoption. There's a lot of challenges. But having a low-code environment certainly does allow you to make much more rapid changes, much more iterative changes, so that you can test all the assumptions you have from a requirements basis, from a user experience basis, to be able to make sure that when you're delivering your final solution, it actually meets everyone's requirements and it's also better positioned to be able to make changes, so that as new regulations happen, as a competitor adds a new capability that you want to match, that you have that ability, and the ability to do it much more rapidly than you could with older legacy platforms. We talked about it a few times, but cloud consumption from a expense perspective, having the ability to scale your system in very fine-grained ways really allows you to maximize the value you're getting for the investment you're making in a cloud platform. So comparatively here, you can see the advantages. Instead of dealing with a single repository, you have the ability to federate and be able to take in content from multitude of different places. The platform capability really provides an easier development platform to build upon. It's on the cloud natively, so you don't have to worry about, can I take my pre-cloud architecture with me to the cloud? Low coding, again, really makes it much easier and faster for you to develop custom content-centric applications. And cloud consumption just really has some pretty obvious benefits for your business. So let's talk a little bit more about this new approach and what some of the opportunities are for you to take advantage of these. So certainly efficiency and automation is a key one that we think organizations can really generate some key value from. Providing a better customer experience because we're able to deliver that on multiple platforms, both desktop and mobile. Being able to take advantage of the cloud, not just for cost reasons and scalability reasons, but also access for your customers. Your customers can interact directly with that and don't have to have any kind of special access to your networks to be able to interact with that system and really provide key information to you so you can make good decisions. And then compliance, again, it's not going away. It's something that you need to make sure that is a key part of what you're thinking about. Artificial intelligence is a key area that we see a lot of value for organizations. So let me talk a little bit about that and how it can really provide some value for you. I think the idea here is that you want to be able to train the system so that it can understand the content data as well as one of your employees, a knowledgeable human that understands what they're looking for. Needs to understand what kind of content it's looking for, needs to be able to extract important information from that content so you don't just have a picture and go look at that picture, but make sure you understand what picture you're looking at so you make sure, if you get a dozen pictures, you're looking at the one that's going to provide the right information at that time. We talked about metadata, and we think artificial intelligence plays a really key role in being able to understand what's in a picture, what's in an audio, what's in video, to be able to pull that information out, to be able to feed the process, or to be able to make that information much more searchable. You want it to be predictable. You need to be able to analyze the usage and be able to go through and make sure you're recognizing patterns where the system is working, where maybe you need to provide better training. And you also want to identify some of the outlying data points so that you can decide whether that's an important area to invest in terms of training your system. Now, there are a lot of public artificial intelligence services available on public cloud systems. Google, AWS, Azure, they all have those capabilities. And when we think about how we see users taking advantage of these, there's some great capabilities out there, and we've used them in our implementations as well, using things like Amazon TextRack to be able to do OCR and ICR capabilities, Google Vision for identifying license plates, for example, on a photograph of an auto accident, using Amazon Transcribe to be able to do subtitles for videos. These are really capabilities that allow us to get some real key information and be able to take advantage of just publicly available capabilities that are relatively inexpensive and can really provide some key value. One of the things we find, though, is that when you're using some of these generic artificial intelligence tools, they provide kind of generic information back to you. They can obviously do some things like identify that you have a Chevrolet logo in there, license plates in there. You can see asphalt. Various pieces of information can be extracted out of there, but it really is just tagging that information. It's not providing that information in any kind of context. When you're applying custom machine learning models and have more specialized artificial intelligence, though, you can actually extract much more specific information, and not just extract it, but also understand what it is that you're extracting. So we can get brand information. For example, we know Chevrolet is a brand, so we'll tag that for that field. We can identify the model of that car, the color of that car, the license plate, and so forth. And there's a lot of examples to this in other types of use cases. But the idea here is that you're not just extracting, information that's tagged. You're actually helping to fill in important fields of information that are going to help drive your business process. And this is where having some level of specialization can really provide value. Let's talk about how intelligent automation actually works within a process, though, because this is I think where the magic really starts to happen. If you have a process that's coming in, you can start to identify, what kind of form am I getting here? So we can classify it, and we know what to do with that information, what we can do with that piece of content once we've received it. If it's not complete, if it hasn't been signed, if it doesn't yield the right information, or we can't get the right information through automated ways, we can route it to an exception handling routine and have someone either reach back out to the customer or maybe manually evaluate whether the form is capable of being processed. And ultimately, once you've extracted all that information, you can move it on to the process and be able to do, in many cases, straight through processing of a claim because you've routed it intelligently. With artificial intelligence, though, you can add some even better value to this. So, we get some pictures perhaps from a customer after an auto accident. We can actually do image processing on them, as we showed a couple slides back, be able to pull out relevant information so we know exactly what type of information we have, and we can how we can use that information to process the claim. In many cases, we can use that to identify fraud detection. Maybe we've seen this picture before, maybe with a different customer, maybe with the same customer, but we know all of a sudden because maybe the date on that photo isn't from the past couple of days, or maybe that we've seen that photo before, so we can identify that and route that to a fraud detection exception, and ultimately engage with the police if necessary to be able to prosecute that. We can also compare the damage against a wealth of information that we can accumulate over time, so that we can start to evaluate whether the type of claim that's being asked for, really matches the situation. So we can have some type of level of, artificial intelligence helping us to identify at least where there might be a mismatch that we need to interrogate further. We can also provide a much greater level of artificial intelligence in terms of being able to predict what we think the accident, the claim value might be, and how much we think the actual damage estimate might incur. So we can actually do intelligent routing based on that information to know, different levels of claim, and also if there's any potential exceptions between what's being asked for and what we're seeing in the claims information. So really the promise of AI is to, as we mentioned earlier, is to really understand things as well as a knowledgeable human would be. We want to be able to predictively deliver information to the business process. We want to have some level of analysis so that we can understand what information is important, how consistent we are in terms of being able to get the right information from our systems, which gives us then information about how much additional training we need to do on the AI system so that it's generating the right results and it's recognizing patterns and connections correctly. And we also want to make sure that we're able to identify those outlying data points that don't really match and need to be evaluated by a human. And that ultimately can then feed back into the system to make the system smarter as we go forward. All right, so how do we get from where we are today to where we need to go? I think that's often where it comes down to, in terms of, if once you identify that there's an approach that you're interested in, geez, how do I get from where I am today to where I need to get to? So I think the first thing is you want to look at it kind of just two steps. One is to connect all of the various information that you need today. So you've got existing systems, you've got existing repositories. Your next generation system needs to make sure it integrates all those various repositories and extends the value of those existing systems. This is going to allow you to get a very fast return on your investment, and it's going to quickly establish a consistent foundation on that new platform so that you can modernize over time. Now, once you've done that, once you've connected all those systems, then you can start to reduce the reliance on some of those legacy systems. You can start to move more and more processes over to the new system. You can start to retire those systems over time, which is going to decrease your total cost of ownership. It puts you in a position with the new platform to be able to support cloud-based initiatives. And so new cloud-based initiatives can all be developed on the new platform. And really, most importantly, it provides you a platform that is future-proof, that has access to the latest technologies, and is the place where innovation is going to take place in the future. So, as much as you might have a system in place that's doing what you need to do today, if that vendor is not investing in future technologies, whether that's AI, whether that's cloud-based, whether that's federation capabilities, whether it's some other new machine learning or other new technologies, the content services platform that you've chosen, whether it's Nixio or some other one, has really provides you a single platform that you know that you can develop going forward. Now, let me take a step back here and look at it from a customer's perspective. We have a customer that is the top 10 insurer in the U.S. They're a Fortune 100 company. They had a legacy ECM system, one they've been using for over 20 years, since the 90s, and they had really invested in that significantly. They had over 100 different applications built on top of that platform that they were using to manage different business processes, different lines of insurance that they provide, different claims processes. They had over 2 billion objects stored in this. They have 30,000 users, so very significant investment in the existing platform. But they had some significant challenges, right? This legacy system was increasingly expensive for them to maintain. The level of innovation on that platform just wasn't keeping pace with many others on the market, whether those were other legacy platforms or newer upstart platforms that are providing new advanced technology capabilities. The platform they were on, this is not moving forward at a pace that gave them confidence that they were going to be well positioned to take advantage of new capabilities. So they really were looking for a solution that was cloud-based. Cloud was very important to them. They also wanted a platform that had open source capabilities, so they could take advantage of being able to plug in new technologies as they found them, that they could make adjustments to the code to meet their specific requirements. So they got some of the benefits of open source from a community innovation perspective. They were also looking for a design, an architectural design from the vendor via an API service layer. So they wanted to be able to build custom user experiences, but they wanted to have a platform that they could work with through APIs to be able to get all the key capabilities that content services platforms provide. So they really were, and the other thing too, and it's not really mentioned on this slide, but they were really looking to move from thinking about content management, instead of thinking about it as file cabinets, a place that I'm storing information. They wanted to think about it as a business system, one that they could that they could really use to help accelerate their business, to provide them tools to be able to be very agile to new business opportunities or changing market conditions. And they wanted to have flexibility there, so they could, whether that's from a scale perspective, whether it's moving from one cloud vendor to another, they wanted a system that really allowed them flexibility in terms of the way they were deploying it in the system. So the benefits here were pretty significant. I mean, they significantly reduced their total cost of ownership. They were able to retire a significant number of legacy applications, and the cost profile of being able to operate the Nixio platform in the cloud really had a significantly reduced cost basis. They were able to manage a whole set of new rich media elements that they were not able to easily handle in their legacy platform. And the last point is really important. The information management team really gained strategic value inside of their organization. I think a quote that I love from them is that they said that it moved their organization and the value that the company saw in their organization from the basement to the boardroom. It all of a sudden became a strategic element of the business, not just a cost factor, not just an infrastructure solution. It really was a strategic element of the overall insurance business. So wrapping up here, I think there's some real key value that I want to make sure that you take away from this, that really being able to help bridge some of your existing silos, to federate that information, so you don't necessarily have to move all that data into a new system, but you can take advantage of where it is, but ultimately start to think about retiring that over time. Being able to unbind some of the customer communications so that you can access and delete individual communications appropriately, and so they're not all bunched in a way that doesn't necessarily meet your claims organization or however you want to organize that information. Artificial intelligence playing a key role in helping to automate both retention and archiving of information. So we can automatically identify what information needs to be retained, what information can be moved to lower cost storage, again, driving down the long-term costs you have. And that certainly was a key factor as well, being able to take advantage of cloud, being able to take advantage of archive tiering, and ultimately only really having expenses really being driven by what you need, not based on what your maximum need is going to be required. So anyway, that's what I wanted to share with you today and give you a little bit of a taste of how Nuxio is helping customers in the insurance business and some of the factors I think are relevant across the market.